this week's episode of Cosmic Sponge. It's a Halloween extravaganza where a witch and a warlock go to war. NASA explores unexplained spooks in our skies. A man watches in horror as his neighbor is chased through the gates of hell. And then a story of a murderer convicted based on the testimony of a ghost. But not before we take time out to uncover the secret ingredient provided by the dead to some pizzerias.
Some thieving Italian have been stealing coffins out of local cemeteries, taking the coffins and chopping them up. Oh, it gets worse. Taking the coffins, chopping them up, and selling them to the local pizzerias in Naples.
Oh, no.
To use in their brick oven pizzas.
Oh. Welcome to Cosmic Sponge, the podcast where we discuss weird wonders in the world. I'm Stephen Hawk.
And I'm Jimmy Cole.
In tonight's episode, since this is going to release one day before Halloween, we decided we would do one more Halloween-themed show. This one is based on sort of a local legend for us. This is called the Greenbrier Ghost. It happened in Greenbrier County, West Virginia, which Jimmy and I both are from West Virginia, so somewhat of a local story for us. It's a few counties north of me, and I guess a long way south for you.
Yeah. Actually, you could almost call this a How-Law-Ween episode.
Man, that'll all become more clear as we get into this story. But before we do that, Jimmy, what has been going on in your world this week?
Hey, they got recycling now in my neighborhood. So now they come here and they pick it up. So I don't have to take it to the recycling location anymore. And, you know.
Wow, this is your life now?
This is my life now.
It's exciting that you have recycling in your neighborhood now. It's your big news for the week.
Well, sort of, because this ties into Italy. And I've always wanted to go to Italy. And I was looking up things to do in Italy, places to go to in Italy. And I saw this story about recycling in Italy. And they've taken it a bit too far, as police have discovered that some thieving Italian bastards have been stealing coffins out of local cemeteries, taking the coffins and chopping them up. Oh, it gets worse. Taking the coffins, chopping them up, and selling them to the local pizzerias in Naples.
Oh, no.
To use in their brick oven pizzas.
Oh.
So
how would they use it in a brick oven? Pizza. I mean,
well, you know how they use wood in those. The brick oven pizzas, they use wood. They're using woods from coffins.
Oh, man.
So get your tuberculosis shots, folks. You never know what's going to be in there.
That is horrible.
Yeah, according to Italian police, there's been reason to believe that coffins, even some hundreds of years old, have been dug up, chopped up, and sold to many low-end pizzerias in order to fuel the wood stoves essential to the classic recipe.
Wow.
Classic recipe.
Classic. That's the secret ingredient in
That's
some
right.
of these pizzerias.
So that delicious margarita pizza that you ate while visiting Naples a few years ago, well, there's a good chance it tasted a little bit like a dead guy.
That's awful. It's terrible, man.
Well, I recycle, but I don't go to those links. Just saying.
You thinking about going to Italy?
Oh, yeah, I'm definitely going to Italy. We were actually scheduled to go to Italy the year that COVID hit. Been saving forever to go.
Yeah.
Well,
you should have a lot more saved up now.
No, I got kids in college. They took all that. Right.
I have a story here. NASA, which we had reported on before, is putting together a panel of 16 people to look into the UAP, the UFO phenomenon. Now, this is going to be a completely civilian-run effort, not to be confused with the Pentagon-led effort examining the military reports and looking at whatever they have so that they can classify it and say that it'll be a matter of national security if we show you a picture of a flying saucer, I guess, or whatever, or a weather balloon or a kid's birthday balloon. This first-of-a-kind panel, organized by NASA, opened a study on Monday, which would have been on the 24th, as we record this a couple of days ago, on what the government calls the unidentified aerial phenomenon, commonly termed UFOs, bringing together experts from scientific fields ranging from physics to astrobiology. The 16-member panel, convened with little fanfare, will focus its inquiry entirely on unclassified sightings and other data collected from civilian, government, and commercial sectors. The parallel NASA-Pentagon efforts highlight a turning point for the U.S. government after spending decades deflecting, debunking, and discrediting observations of unidentified flying objects, or UFOs, dating back to the 1940s. NASA said there is no evidence UAPs are extraterrestrial in origin. Pentagon report issued earlier this year likewise found insufficient data to determine the nature of more than 140 credible sightings documented by military observers since 2004, mostly naval personnel. NASA said its panel would spend 9 months devising its own strategy for how to organize and study sightings before recommending a roadmap of potential UAP data analysis by the agency going forward. Its first report to be made public in mid-2023. Understanding the data that we have surrounding unidentified aerial phenomena is critical to helping us draw scientific conclusions about what's happening in our skies, said Thomas Zurbuchen, Associate NASA Administrator. Data is the language of scientists and makes the unexplainable explainable.
Hey, Harold. We know that you have 8 years of college learning aerospace engineering and 10 years working on the rover program. But we need you to move over to this other program and talk to these guys over here with these tinfoil hats so that we can get a little bit more information on balloons.
The panel is chaired by David Spergel, who formerly headed Prince University's astrophysics department. Other members include Anna Marie Berea, a research affiliate at the SETI Institute, that's the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence Institute in Mountain View, California, retired NASA astronaut and test pilot Scott Kelly, University of Rhode Island biological oceanographer Paula Bontempi, and University of California at San Diego astrophysicist Shelley Wright.
It's all the people who drew the short straw.
Anyway, it will be interesting to see what this group of scientists come up with. They said they'll have a report by mid-2023, so I'm guessing June, July, somewhere in that time frame.
Hey, I'm just giving good-natured ribbing here. For one, I'm glad that they're actually taking some time out of their day to look at this stuff finally from a scientific point of view. We've got Avi Loeb's Galileo group, a NASA group going after it. And then we have these independent groups like UAPX, that nonprofit that's run by Kevin Knuth. I don't even know how to say his last name. It's spelled Knuth. Like canoe.
That's how you say it.
Yeah, but it's not spelled like canoe. It's spelled like knock. So I think maybe the K silent, Knuth. But he's a physicist. He's a legit guy. Yeah. So I'm glad that we're finally getting to the bottom of this. I don't trust the government folks, though.
I don't know. I guess we'll see. I don't have a lot of faith in it. I think it's going to be another Condon committee, personally, from the 1960s when a bunch of scientists got together and looked at it and said, oh, there's nothing to it.
I want to build rovers. I don't want to do balloons.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be, and listeners, if you're interested, we did a couple of episodes early in the show called The History of UFOs, where we went back and discussed the entire history, starting with Kenneth Arnold all the way through to today. And in the 1960s, there was a congressional hearing, and after the decision was made to have a scientific panel look into UFOs because the public wanted to know. The Air Force was all about it because they had Project Blue Book and quite frankly, didn't want to be involved investigating UFOs. So they formed the Condon Committee. It was based in the University of Colorado. After a year and a half, or was it 2 years maybe, of study, the conclusion was there was nothing to the phenomenon. And after that, the whole scientific community just shut it down because there was no way to get a grant or I mean, that's the way these guys live, right? Research people, they need money to function. And they said after that happened, there was no interest at all, nor was there any grant money available for anyone that wanted to look into UFOs. So it was up to just private individuals to look at it on their own.
Yeah, it was a big bummer. Big bummer through the 80s and 90s. You just had to rely on the unsolved mystery shows.
Right.
Reruns of Twilight Zone. Hey, I got something here. How about this? Getting back into the Halloween swing of things before we go into our main topic. How about this for a headline? Witch victorious over warlock in Salem court battle.
Wow.
Yeah, in a city where accused witches were once jailed and hanged, witch Lori Bruno Sorfaza, a witch with bad judgment because she decided to live in Salem of all places, emerged victorious from a Salem, Massachusetts courtroom on Wednesday, proclaiming justice served for women everywhere. Now, Sorfaza, what a name, is a 75-year-old fortune teller. And she says she's been harassed for years by late-night phone calls and vicious internet posts from a warlock in New Orleans. She claimed that he called me the C word. Well, holy crap. I mean, anybody call me a Californian, and I'd get upset too.
Yeah.
So, C word. There we go. Wearing a long black coat and necklaces of pentacles, Forza steadied herself with a cane topped by a silver skull. She told the judge she could see her own future and that she's afraid of Day. That's a guy, I guess, who's been harassing her, who she claims hissed the word, the C word, Californian, on the phone and hung up multiple times. Day wore a blue suit and has dark hair tinged purple. Well, I saw that coming. Protested Judge Robert A. Brennan's decision, ordering him to have no contact with the witch or face up to 2.5 years in prison.
And they drug him all the way to Massachusetts from New Orleans?
Oh, yeah. They got a picture of him here. He looks like you would expect a modern-day warlock with purple-tinged hair to look.
Well, I think that's the standard dress code.
Yeah, unhealthy eating habits for sure in this guy. He probably should check that out.
I wonder if they knew each other before.
They did.
They met.
They did indeed.
When they were astrally projecting or something.
Well, no, she actually brought him up and treated him like her own son.
Oh.
And then he turned on her. Why? It's hard to say, but it looks like it has to do with they had shops in similar location. She used to work for him. Oh, here it is. She used to work for him, and then she got tired of his abusive ways. So she split away from him and started her own little witch place. The world's most famous warlock was his place. His Twitter
versus the world's most famous witch.
Yeah, probably. His Twitter tagline describes him as warlock, drama queen, bitch. Yeah. So, she started her own little shop. I don't know what it's called. It doesn't have it in here, or if it does, I'm missing it.
The witch.
Which witch is it? I don't know. That witch. So, yeah, I mean, just don't go calling a witch a Californian and, you won't end up in court. Unless the C word is something else.
Maybe she went over to the dark side or something. It's really what the dispute's about.
Yeah, could be.
He was trying to bring her back into the light or something.
Oh, I found
I don't
it.
know how that works.
So Forza testified the harassment began 3 years ago when she quit working for him and opened her own boutique called Magica. Magica with a K. On the Salem waterfront.
Fancy.
Yeah, and bold, a witch staying in Salem. Some bad blood there.
Yeah, well, congratulations.
For
What was her name?
Sorfosa. That's fortune teller Lori Bruno Sorfosa.
I still don't get it. She worked for him, opened up a shop in Salem, but he's from New Orleans. It doesn't seem like they would be in the same market. I guess
he relocated to New Orleans after probably his shop didn't do well because Sorfosa took over.
She ran him out of business.
Right, because she's the brains behind it. She's the fortune teller behind it. I don't want to say she's the brains, but she's probably the psychic behind it.
Right, she knew what to stock because she could, just
see the future.
See the future and be like, if I stock this, it'll work well.
That's right. I know next week's inventory. I could use her.
Exactly. I know who's coming in and what they're going to be looking for, so I'm going to go ahead and order it now.
Yeah, you just come into the shop and she just hands it to you as you're walking in.
Yeah,
Oh,
here
I
you
didn't
go.
do this.
That'll be 1995. Thank you.
Everything's 1995.
That's just what I was looking for. How did you know? And then she just gives a knowing smile.
That's right. So there you have it. Witches and warlocks.
Do you have any other news then for tonight?
Nope. I mean, I have some stuff for later.
What about? I thought you had one other news story, that pretty pressing one that you read. You told me about earlier, something about a hat.
Oh yes. Well, I mean, we do have that one. It's
This isn't really paranormal or science or anything, but it is a pretty good news story.
Yeah. I found this one and I thought I would bring it to everybody, but then, I wasn't so sure.
Hey, you never know. A listener could be involved out there somewhere.
That's true. Okay, so folks, a hat has been found up a tree in Bilton. The woolen head garment, which is red and has a bauble, was discovered on Tuesday by Bilton Lane resident Sharon Bromance, age 43. I could hardly believe my eyes when I saw it up there, she said. I got it down with a stick, and I put it on a fence post. The owner of the hat now has until April 10th, 2023 to reclaim the hat, after which it will be destroyed. The things you find.
That's hilarious. I don't even know where you found that. It sounds like it's out of the Monroe Watchman, a newspaper from Monroe County that's like a weekly newspaper. My mom's from Monroe County, and so she takes the paper, and I gave it, I went to the mail and got it for her the other day, and I brought it in. I said, here you go. You can read about whose cattle got out last week.
Well, I just type in weird stories, and sometimes it comes up with stuff like that.
Oh, I got you. Cool. Well, all right. By the way, if that is your hat, you should go see this lady. I wonder why it was in a tree.
It's probably the wind blew it up there, or a cat stole it.
Mean kid grabbed it and threw it up there.
Oh, that's probably it. Bullies.
Like your gym sneakers, the bully always grabs and throws it over the power lines.
Yeah,
So,
jerks.
I've seen it in movies anyway. Never happened to me.
Yeah, me either. I was poor. I didn't have shoes.
You had to wear your sneakers. All right. Well, moving right along, I'd like to remind everyone to please rate and review the podcast. It helps other people find the show. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Be sure to check out our webpage, cosmicsponge.com. There you can find the web store and also ways to support the show, such as buy me a coffee for a one-time donation, or you can become a Patreon. Just when you're on the webpage, follow the links. If you do become a patron through Patreon, you'll gain access to another show we do called Weird Wonders that we produce exclusively for our Patreon supporters. Our contact information is firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. Jimmy and I, over the past couple of months, really have seen just tremendous growth. We really appreciate it, and it really makes doing the show worthwhile. So what I would like you to do is email us with any kind of comments or suggestions or any ideas you might have for the show. Let us know what you think. We would really appreciate the feedback. All right, well, let's move on to tonight's main topic, which is the Greenbrier Ghost. And Jimmy, I'm sure you've done some research on this, so why don't you get us started on this story tonight?
Okay, here we go. The hunting party took pot shots at the local rabbit population between sips of questionable rum. The date was the 15th of May, 1687. Captain Barnaby was enjoying a hunting trip on the island of Stromboli with a few of his peers. Stromboli, located off the west coast of Italy, was home to an active volcano. The hunting party had just taken away Sir Dickworth Cheney's firearm for being a bit too liberal with his aim. Okay, I made that last part up. When suddenly a figure, chased by another, burst from the surrounding foliage. It took no time at all for Captain Barnaby to identify the man being chased, and he exclaimed, "Lord bless us! The foremost is old Booty, my next-door neighbor." It was at
Hold on a second.
Yeah?
Before you go any further, this is supposed to be in Italy, right?
Yeah.
Okay, why are you doing like the English accent?
Because it's a British guy who is a merchant who's down there. He's a captain of a ship, and he's down there with his...
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you just broke my stride.
Just to continue with your story.
Thank you, you thieving Italian jerk. Go back and dig up another coffin. It was at this point that Captain Barnaby did the only logical thing and rallied his men to take chase in order to assist Old Man Booty from the man currently pursuing him with seemingly hostile intent. Wait, what I meant to say was that Barnaby had his companions record the incident in their pocket notebooks, transcribing everything up to and including the moment when both figures ran into volcanic fire accompanied by a resounding boom. The entire affair would then be entered into Captain Barnaby's ship's log, definitively identifying Old Man Booty as the man running into the flames of hell. Likewise, it would be entered into the ship's logs of 2 other captains that were in the hunting party. Now, 5 months later, Captain Barnaby returned to England and was joined by his wife. Both would attend a dinner party in the city of Gravesend upon his return. While in the company of Captain Brown, Captain Bristow, and Mr. Ball, a local merchant, Captain Barnaby's wife informed him that their neighbor, Old Man Booty, had died while Barnaby was away, to which he replied, "By Jove, we saw him run into hell." Miss Barnaby, being a prolific gossip, began to recount the story to anyone with at least one good ear. In no time at all, the captain's tale made its way to Old Man Booty's wife, who was none too happy about her husband going to hell. And so she had Captain Barnaby arrested for slander. After making bail, Barnaby went before the court to address the claim. The trial was over almost as soon as it had started, as over 30 men attested to the event, which was recorded in 3 separate ship's logs, and the judge, being a regular at Captain Barnaby's bridge games on Saturdays after tea and crumpets, promptly ruled against the poor widow, proclaiming, "Lord have mercy on me, and grant I may never see what you have seen, for 2 or 3 may be mistaken, but 30 can never be mistaken. We still on for cards this weekend, big guy?" From time to time, the paranormal makes its way into the court of law, with slander being a favorite when involving antics from the other side of the veil. But only once could I find a case where testimony of a ghost was used to convict a killer. Tonight, we recount the tale of the blacksmith and the Greenbrier Ghost. And I'll hand it over to Steve to get us rolling.
That was good. It was a good story.
Fun little
So
story.
they were in Italy hunting, and they saw his neighbor's ghost.
Yeah, so he's a merchant, this Captain Barnaby, and he was out with a bunch of other merchants who were captains, you know, that were transferring goods.
What I'm getting at, they weren't near home or anything.
No,
Is that
they were
right?
on this island, and all of a sudden his neighbor runs out from the brush and runs into the volcanic fire. And then, you know, it's like a game of telephone. He tells his wife and embellishes a little bit and says he ran into hell. And then she says it wasn't a volcano he ran into. My husband saw him run into hell. And then, you know, it's like they're very Christian, I'm sure, 1600s. So,
Yeah.
you know, Christian country, Catholic country. So it's like, you don't want your husband, everybody telling you your husband's went to hell.
But it's interesting that he appeared in front of all these captains and hunting party very far from home.
Yeah, I think they were eating mushrooms on the island at the time, and that may have contributed to the sighting.
Or maybe it was just some other guy that kind of looked like his neighbor, and they were,
It was the tainted rum. Like I said, they were drinking questionable rum.
they were hunting wild turkey.
And they got it, and they drank it.
So this story is about a lady named Zona Heaster Shue. Zona was born in Greenbrier County, West Virginia, around 1873. Not a whole lot is known about her life before this, although Jimmy had found in his research, apparently she had had a child out of wedlock.
Yeah, a bit of a free spirit, you know, like the Run with the Boys.
This story really begins in October of 1896. In the Richlands region of Greenbrier County, she met a man named Erasmus Stribling Trout Shue. He was a drifter. He came to Greenbrier County to work as a blacksmith and to start a new life for himself. He began working in the shop of James Crookshanks, which was located just off the Old Midland Trail. And a blacksmith in those days could find plenty of work along this rough, unpaved trail throughout the county, and Shue became well known for his work. Now, he was described as a bit of a brutish type man. He's a big man, maybe a little bit of a bully aspect to him.
He's good looking.
But regardless, Zona had become acquainted with him a short time after he arrived in town. The two of them were attracted to each other and soon were married, despite the animosity felt towards Shu by Zona's mother, Mary Jane Robinson Heister. She had taken an instant dislike to him because she felt that there was something he was hiding, despite his amiable attitude.
Well, he went by the name Edward. And what he was hiding was that long-ass name that nobody wanted to say because they fell asleep halfway through saying it. Matter of fact, Edward was even too long for the local people, so everybody referred to him as Trout.
Just Trout.
Just
That's
Trout,
right.
Yep.
So the Shus lived together as man and wife for several months, but then on January 23rd, 1897, it was a normal day just like any other. Some people say it was cold and blustery that day. Trout was working at the blacksmith shop. There was a young boy there named Andy Jones. And he asked Andy, Trout did, to run by his house, ask his wife if there was anything she needed from the store before he came home. Andy goes by the house, and when he enters the house, he finds Zona lying on the floor at the bottom of the stairs. She was stretched out with her feet together. One hand was on her abdomen. The other was lying next to her. Her head was turned slightly to one side, and her eyes were wide open and staring. Even to this small boy, Zona's Shu was obviously dead. Andy ran home to tell his mother, and then ran to tell Trout. At this point, I'm not sure if he told the doctor or if his mother told the doctor, but the local doctor and the coroner, Dr. George W. Knapp, and I was thinking, George Knapp, isn't it the guy from Las Vegas that does the UFO stuff?
Oh, yeah, the newscaster. Yeah, that was his great-great-great-grandfather. Because, George Knapp is old man Knapp's boy. Old man Knapp's boy. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time Dr. Knapp arrived at the home, it took him nearly an hour to get there. But by this time, Trout had carried his wife's body upstairs, laid her out on the bed, dressed the corpse in a very fine dress, and wrapped the scarf around her neck. This was very unusual. Usually the local custom would be ladies of the community would wash and dress the body in preparation for burial. However, Trout took it upon himself to dress Zona in her best clothing. A high-necked, stiff-collared dress covered her neck and a veil was placed over her face. Now, when Dr. Knapp tried to examine her, or anybody got close to the body, Trout would become very agitated and upset and was very, very distraught. He was right by his wife's side the entire time, cradling her head and sobbing. And because of Trout's obvious grief, Knapp gave the body only a cursory examination. And although he did notice a bit of bruising on her neck, whenever the doctor tried to look closer, Trout reacted so violently that the physician ended the examination and he left. Initially, he listed her cause of death as everlasting faint, and then as childbirth. Now, I don't know. I don't have any record. I don't know if you do, Jimmy, whether she was pregnant or not.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's probably legend. And everlasting faint, I had to look that up because that sounds like she died from death. Because everlasting faint is like permanent death. But yeah.
In those days, I don't know. Men assumed women fainted over everything, right?
Yeah. Well, I looked it up. Most doctors believe that most of the cases that were attributed to everlasting faint were the results of heart attacks.
Oh, I see.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And she was at the bottom of the stairs. So she had a heart attack and fell down the stairs, I suppose, is what the physician decided was wrong with her. And it's unknown whether Zona was pregnant, but 2 weeks prior to her death, Knapp had treated her for, quote, female trouble.
Female trouble? That could be a lot of different things, really.
Well, right. I mean, it could have even been a bad menstrual cycle. I mean, female trouble. People were very embarrassed to talk about those sort of things in those days.
Yeah. Yeah. Female trouble could be all kinds. It could be construction workers who are hooting and hollering on their way. I mean, there's all kinds of troubles.
Dr. Knapp then sent someone out to notify Zona's parents, but word of the young woman's death had already quickly spread through the community. By late afternoon, 2 young men who were friends of Zona's volunteered to ride out to an area called Meadow Bluff and tell the Heister family what had happened. The Heisters lived in an isolated area about 15 miles away, where a small scattering of homes and farms were nestled against the side of Little Sewell Mountain. When she was informed of the news of her daughter's death, Mary Heister's face grew dark. She reportedly said the devil has killed her. Then on Saturday, January 24th, Zona's body was taken by carriage to her parents' home. A handful of neighbors presided over the funeral entourage, and they brought Trout along with them to the mountain farm. He showed extraordinary devotion toward his wife's body, keeping a vigil at the head of the open coffin as the wagon traveled over the rutted and bumpy roads. The body was displayed at the Heaster's house for the wake, an event that lasted all day Sunday. It gave neighbors and friends an opportunity to pay their last respects to the dead and visit with one another, give solace to the bereaved, and to bring food for the family. A few local ladies sat up with the body throughout the night until the time of the burial on Monday. Those who came to pay their respects during the wake did seem to notice this bizarre behavior of Trout. His grief swung back and forth between overwhelming sadness and manic energy and almost violent outbursts if someone approached Zona. And he just absolutely would not allow anyone to get too close to the coffin, especially while he was placing a pillow on one side of her head and a rolled up cloth on the other. He told everyone that he wanted her to be comfortable and that it would help her rest easier. In addition to that, he tied this large scarf around her neck and explained tearfully that it had been Zona's favorite. When it came time to move the corpse to the cemetery, though, several people noticed that there seemed to be a strange looseness to Zona's head. Just as they were closing the lid, a few people noticed that her head seemed to move about. Needless to say, the people started to talk, and speculation began about how Zona had perhaps really met her end.
So Zona did look a lot like the bad guy in Men in Black 1, the first movie with Will Smith. You know, when the monster comes down and harvests the farmer and wears the farmer as his skin and the neck is all like really jiggly. That's sort of what Zona's neck looked like, just to give some clarity on that front.
So although people began to speculate a bit, Mary Jane Heaster, Zona's mother, did not need to speculate about whether or not Trout had had some part in her daughter's death. She was convinced that he had. She had disliked the man from the start and had never wanted Zona to marry him. She was sure that he had murdered her, but there was no way that she could prove it. At the wake, Mary took the sheet from inside the coffin and tried to return it to Trout, but he refused it, folding it back up and put it away. She noticed it had a peculiar odor, so she washed it out. She came to believe that what happened next was some sort of strange omen. Mary dropped the sheet into the wash basin, and when she did, the water inside turned red. Strangely, a few moments later, the sheet turned pink and the color in the water disappeared. Mary Jane then boiled the sheet and hung it outside for several days, but the stain could not be removed. She interpreted the eerie bloodstains as a sign that Zona had been murdered.
That's spooky.
After this strange incident, she began to pray. Every night for the next 4 weeks, Mary Jane prayed fervently that her daughter would return to her and reveal the truth about how she had died. According to her story, a few weeks later, her prayers were answered. Over the course of 4 dark nights, the spirit of Zona Shoe...
Wait a minute. 4 dark nights?
Yeah, stormy nights, too.
What other kind of night would it be?
Come on, man. I'm trying to add a little bit of drama here, man. You're just like blowing my whole story here.
I'm sorry. Go on with your dark nights.
Over the course of 4 dark and stormy nights. Okay, I don't know if they were stormy, but the spirit of Zona appeared at her mother's bedside. She would come as a bright light at first, and then an apparition would take form, chilling the air in the entire room. She woke her mother and explained over and over again how her husband had murdered her. Trout Shoe had been abusive and cruel and had attacked her in a fit of rage because he thought she had not cooked any meat for supper. He had savagely broken her neck, and to show this, the ghost turned her head completely around until it was facing backwards.
Ooh, like The Exorcist?
Mary Jane had described the ghost of her daughter as once the apparition appeared, she looked just as she did in life, other than she had these injuries on her body. She did not look like a ghost. I couldn't see through her or anything. It was just like having a normal conversation with anyone. But her daughter had these wounds, and she had the bruises on her neck, and her neck was broken. She also had other wounds on her body as clear signs of abuse. A short time later, Mary Jane went to the local prosecutor, John Alfred Preston, and tried to convince him to reopen the investigation into Zona's death. She offered the visitations from her daughter's spirit as evidence that a miscarriage of justice was taking place. By all accounts, Preston was both polite and sympathetic to Mrs. Heaster. The two spoke together for several hours, and at the end of the meeting, Preston agreed to dispatch deputies to speak with Dr. Knapp and a few others involved in the case. And also at this time, the town had been talking. People had noticed her head lolling about when they shut the lid to the coffin. So it didn't take a whole lot of convincing for them to take the next steps that happened here. So while it seems unlikely that he was willing to take another look at the case because of the statement of a ghost, the investigation did get reopened. Local newspapers reported that Mrs. Heaster was not the only one in the community who was suspicious about Zona's death. There were also certain citizens who had started to ask questions, as well as the growing rumors in the community. Preston himself went to see Dr. Knapp, and the physician admitted that his examination of the dead woman had been cursory and incomplete. The two of them agreed that an autopsy was needed to answer the questions about Zona's death once and for all. If Trout was innocent of any wrongdoing, this would clear his name. A few days later, exhumation was ordered and an inquest jury was assembled. The autopsy was performed in the Nichols Schoolhouse, which was just a short distance away from Seoul Methodist Church graveyard where Zona had been buried. The school children were dismissed, thankfully, on the day in February 22nd, 1897, unless they need some kind of anatomy lesson here, right?
Dissection today is going to be top-notch, kids.
And Zona Shu's grave was opened. It was reported in the local newspaper that Trout vigorously complained about the exhumation, but it was made clear to him that he would be forced to attend the inquest if he did not attend willingly. He replied, "They will not be able to prove I did it." This was a rather odd and careless statement for a man who claimed to be innocent. The autopsy lasted for 3 hours under the uncertain light of kerosene lanterns. The body of the dead woman was in a near state of perfect preservation thanks to the cold temperatures of February, making the work of the doctors much easier to complete. A jury of 5 men had been assembled to watch the proceedings, and they huddled together in the cold building with officers of the court. Trout, Andy Jones, the boy who had originally found the body, and other witnesses and spectators. The autopsy was carried out by the standard methods, which meant that the examination of the vital organs came first. After that, the doctors would normally cut an incision along the back of the skull so that the brain could be removed, but this step was not taken in the case of Zona because the doctors quickly found what they were looking for. One of the doctors turned to Trout Shu and said, "We have found your wife's neck to have been broken." Trout's head dropped, and an expression of despair crossed his face. He whispered, "They cannot prove I did it."
Yeah, he said, "You can't prove that I snapped her neck like that."
Right. I mean, that is an odd thing to say, right?
Been super easy for me to do it, but you can't prove it. I mean, I would have done it like this.
I mean, it's not like I'm a blacksmith or anything and I'm super strong and, swing hammers all day for a living and work with my hands, have strong hands or anything.
Yeah, and those fingerprints around her neck look just like my fingerprints. That's just coincidence. I didn't do it, I say. But I mean, he was a normal guy up to that point. I mean, his motive is just anger, right?
Anger that apparently there was no meat in the house to cook.
Yeah.
Which I'm kind of like, let's go down to the general store and get something. I don't know what they do. Go out in the field and whack something. I don't know.
Shoot a pig in the head.
Yeah, there you go.
There's some bacon.
Have some ham for supper.
Bacon's just running around on the yard.
A report on March 9th stated, the discovery was made that the neck was broken and the windpipe mashed. On the throat were the marks of fingers indicating that she had been choking.
Choking?
Choking. This was right off the report.
Got it.
The neck was dislocated between the first and second vertebrae. The ligaments were torn and ruptured. The windpipe had been crushed at a point in front of the neck. The findings were made public at once, upsetting many in the community. Trout was arrested and charged with murder. He was locked up in the small stone jail on Washington Street in Lewisburg, and in spite of the fact that the evidence against him was circumstantial at best, he was indicted by a grand jury and was formally arraigned for murder. He immediately entered a plea of not guilty. While he awaited trial, information about Trout's unsavory past began to surface. Zona had been his third wife. His first marriage to Allie Esteline Cutlip had produced one child, but had ended in divorce in 1889 while Trout was in prison for horse stealing. His wife alleged in the divorce decree that Trout had been violent and had frequently beaten her. In 1894, Trout had married again, this time to Lucy Ann Tritt. Lucy died just 8 months later under circumstances that were described as, quote, mysterious, Trout claimed that Lucy fell and hit her head on a rock, but few believed him. Before any action could be taken against him, he packed up and left the area. In the fall of 1896, he moved to Greenbrier County.
That is suspicious.
In jail, Trout remained in good spirits and reported that his grieving for Zona had ended. In fact, he announced that he had a lifelong goal of having 7 wives. Since Zona had only been his third and he was still a young man, he had a good chance of realizing such a worthwhile ambition. He repeatedly told reporters that his guilt in this matter could not be proved. The trial began on June 22, 1897, and numerous people from the community testified against Trout. The highlight of the trial, of course, came with the appearance of Mary Jane Heister. Preston put her on the stand as both mother of the dead woman and also as the first person to notice the unusual circumstances of Zona's death. He wanted to make sure that she appeared both sane and reliable. Now, at this point, the community is aware that she has had these dreams with her daughter's spirit, her ghost, right?
Oh, yeah.
It was important that the prosecutor get her on the stand, have her as a witness of her daughter and things that she had actually witnessed. He did not bring up the ghost because, for one thing, it would be hearsay, right?
Right.
For this reason, he skirted around the issue of the ghost because it was bound to make her appear irrational and also because it was inadmissible evidence. The teller of this story in the case of Zona could obviously not be cross-examined by the defense, so her testimony would have been hearsay under the law. Unfortunately for Trout, his attorney decided to ask Mrs. Heister about her ghostly sighting. It seemed obvious that he was doing this to try and make Mary Jane look ridiculous to the jury. He characterized her visions as a mother's ravings and worked hard to admit that she might have been mistaken about what she allegedly saw. He continued to badger her for quite some time, but Mary Jane never wavered in her descriptions of Zona's ghost, nor about what the specter had told her about Trout's guilt. When the defense counsel realized that the testimony was not going the way that he wanted, he finally dismissed her. By that time, though, the damage was done. Because the defense and not the prosecution had introduced the testimony about the spirit, the judge had a hard time telling the jury to exclude it. It was apparent that most of the people in the community believed that Mary Jane had seen her daughter's ghost. Despite Trout's eloquent testimony in his own defense, the jury quickly found him guilty. 10 of them even voted that he be hanged, which spoke volumes about Mrs. Heister's believability as a witness. Without a unanimous verdict of death, though, Trout was sentenced to life in prison.
Yeah, they wanted to kill that guy.
Well, it was only 10, and you needed 12.
It didn't end there, because after he was convicted, a mob formed, a lynch mob. They wanted to take him out.
The sentence did not satisfy everyone in Greenbrier County. On July 11th, 1897, a citizens group of anywhere from 15 to 30 men assembled 8 miles west of Lewisburg to form a lynching party.
a citizen group. We call it a mob.
Right. They had purchased a new rope and were well armed when they started toward the jail.
Leave that old nasty rope behind. He deserves a new rope.
I got a new rope, everybody.
Let's break it in.
The sheriff was alerted, and undoubtedly Trout would have been hanged that night. But it was said that when Trout was informed that there were threats against his life, he became greatly agitated and was unable to tie his own shoes. The sheriff hid him in the woods a mile or so from town until deputies were able to disband the mob and return them to their homes. Trout was later moved to West Virginia's State Penitentiary in Moundsville on July 14th, where he lived for the next 3 years. He died on March 13th, 1900, from one of the epidemics that swept through the prison that spring. At that time, the prison commonly buried unclaimed remains in the nearby Tom's Run Cemetery, for which no records were kept until the 1930s. Thanks to this, no trace of Trout Shrew can be found today. Mary Jane Robinson Heister lived to tell her tale and all who would listen. She died in September of 1916 without ever recanting her story about her daughter's ghost. As for Zona, her ghost was never seen again, but she has left a haunting, historical mark on Greenbrier County. It is one that is still being felt today. In fact, a roadside marker along Route 60 still commemorates the case. And this is what it reads. Interred in nearby cemetery is Zona Heister Shue. Her death in 1897 was presumed natural until her spirit appeared to her mother, to describe how she was killed by her husband, Edward. Autopsy on the exhumed body verified the apparition's account. Edward, found guilty of murder, was sentenced to the state prison, only known case in which testimony from a ghost helped convict a murderer.
Man, you did a great job. I was on the edge of my seat the whole time, and I knew the story, but, I mean, I just had bullet points, things that sort of said, Trout killed woman. Woman did exorcist ghostly apparition to mama. Mama takes out Trout.
Well, I did find a nice write-up on a website called American Hauntings, the Greenbrier Ghost. There's some other great stories on here, too. So what do you think? Really a ghost?
Nah, I don't think so.
What do you think happened? Do you believe in ghosts?
I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in ghosts at all. I've never seen any evidence of them. I'm a skeptic. I don't believe in ghosts. I've never seen anything that looks like a ghost. I've never seen poltergeist activity. I've seen some really thin, pale people before, but I mean, I've never seen.
I thought about this some after I read this story. So Jimmy and I, we did our Halloween episode last week where we talked about, some famous monsters and everything. And then throughout the week, I ran across this story and I called him up. I said, hey man, let's do the Greenbrier Ghost. It would be kind of cool. And we're still going to be one day before Halloween, just because it is somewhat of a local story here. Mm-hmm. So I've wondered about this. I mean, this was Zona's mother. And if anybody knew that Zona was being abused by her husband, it was probably Mary Jane. I mean, we don't know what kind of conversations that Zona had with her mother, but I wouldn't doubt that she would say, see a bruise on her arm or it's obvious he beat his wife. And so even before he killed her, he was probably violent with her. The mother probably knew that he was violent. Maybe she had a dream that Zona come and said my neck was broken. But already people in the community were talking. They knew something was up. First of all, he's acting weird the whole time. Doctor can't get close to the body. He's already dressed her in her clothes and put this scarf around her neck. And
her head's moving like it's on a spring.
Another account I read of this was he said that was her favorite scarf. Well, her mother never knew her ever to have a favorite scarf. And they'd only been married 3 months. I just feel like it's probably more of a mother's intuition. Maybe she had a dream about her daughter's ghost. Maybe she just knew it. And that was the way to push the prosecutor into reopening the case. I don't think it was very difficult for them to reopen the case because of the talk and it's a super small community, right? Mm-hmm. And I just think that everyone in town knew something was up. I doubt Preston I doubt there was a lot of convincing to get him to do it.
Yeah, we both grew up in a relatively small community in West Virginia, and while it was small, there were even smaller ones further out.
Well, this is late 1800s, very remote, little communities, agricultural communities over in Greenbrier County. This is far, far away from any kind of coal fields that maybe listeners think about West Virginia. I mean, this is rural and it's agricultural.
Right. So, but I was saying, we grew up in a small town, and even then, right, it was much larger than that. Even then, we're a pretty tight-knit community. And my family actually comes from that Greenbrier area on my father's side. So I'd gone up there several times as a kid and familiar with the area, really small. And everybody knows everybody, and it's a tight-knit community, and it's very easy to see how this kind of thing would unfold, given that Trout was an asshole.
And my mother's family is from Monroe County, which is very rural, even more so maybe than Greenbrier County, even to this day. I mean, literally everybody in the county knows everyone else. Yeah. It's such a small, it's the least populated county in the entire state.
I was going to say, all 5 people there know each other.
And it's, agricultural. This is the kind of community she came from, but 100 years ago, 120 some years ago. So you can only imagine everyone was talking. And then on the other hand, he was the outsider, right?
Yeah. And, he killed a couple people before that, or at least one.
Yeah. So probably his second wife.
Yeah.
And his first wife said that he beat her.
She got out just in time.
But he only made it 3 years after that. Maybe Zona's ghost got him.
Yeah, probably.
He was in Moundsville. They say it's haunted now.
Yeah, and she didn't have long to travel, very far to travel. It's still in the state.
Yeah, well.
I don't know how ghosts travel. I mean, she might not take a carriage, a horse, or something. I mean, I don't know.
Anything you need to add to this story, Jimmy? Any insights you have on it?
No, other than to say, man, you did a great job telling the story. I was on the edge of my seat. A lot of that I didn't have in my notes. I had just bullet points going down, and then I did have a breakdown of it from other sites that were not quite as robust as the source material you had. So that's great. Love it.
Well, all right. I think we are going to wrap up this special Greenbrier Ghost edition of Cosmic Sponge right here. Before we get out of here, I'd like to remind everyone, please rate and review the podcast. It helps others find the show. Check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Look for us on the web at cosmicsponge.com, and our contact information is firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. Jimmy, did I leave anything out?
No, I think you got it all, man.
All right, with all that being said, this is Stephen Hawk signing out, and we'll see you next week.
And Jimmy Coe, keep your eyes to the skies and your feet on the ground. We'll see you next week. Hey, man, I was looking for news articles, and I was doing a lot of search for scary, spooky stuff, and I found this site called X something. We'll just say it's X something. But they had a lot of different article titles on it, article headings, and they were really good. I was captivated by them. And then I looked and I found the original heading that they were going to go with, and then they had somebody work some magic on it. So, for example, one of them was, women are convinced they caught audio of ghosts laughing at their bad joke. And the original title, before they fixed it up and made that really good heading, was two comedians desperately searching for good material hallucinate in public. There's several other here. I mean, look at this one. Medium patiently explains the truth behind spirit orbs. Now, I would click on that.
Yeah.
But the one that they had before it was Spirit Orbs, only $19.95 for a limited time. See Madame Theodosia for store locations.
Just don't pay attention to the warlock dressed in a purple suit.
Yeah, you stay away from that guy.
He's not affiliated with the store.
At all. Oh, here's a good one. There's two more. A ghost hunter shares the scariest ghost footage he's ever captured from the 90s, and it does not disappoint. Now, I clicked on that.
Is it Pearl Jam?
And the original article title was Lost Video of News Anchor Anderson Cooper was recently discovered by Ghost Hunter. And then,
so it wasn't Pearl Jam.
No, it wasn't Pearl Jam. It's Henderson Cooper. Scariest ghost footage. EVP reading catches flirty spirit hitting on Ghost Hunter. Oh. Yeah, and the original title for the article was James Franco takes up new hobby after finding EVP emitter. A lot of good stuff there.
If people may have clicked on James Franco.
Yeah.
Just because he's a celebrity.
Yeah, that's true. Man swears he saw demon in North Carolina and people are warning him to forget about it. The original title was Ugly North Carolina Man Taunted by Tourist Threatens Lawsuit.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway.
Good one.
Yeah, so great stuff out there if you know where to look for it.
All right, man. Let's get out of here.
For sure. Happy Halloween, everybody.
Happy Halloween.
And go to the contest if you're hearing this before the 31st. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. If you should be hearing this, you've got about 24 hours.
Yeah. For the contest.
To join the contest.
Good
Unless
stuff.
you're listening to it on Monday.
Yeah.
If you're listening on Tuesday, it's too late.
Right. So go to cosmicsponge.com. It's on the homepage there. Easy to enter. Just enter an email address. Any email address. We're going to draw on November 1st, and we'll be in contact with you and then announce it on the show the following week to everybody. But we'll be in contact with you between November 1st and that next show on like November 7th, 8th, or something like that. November 6th.
November 6th.
November 6th. This is when we'll announce it to everybody. But
we had the same conversation last week.
Yeah. Dang. I'm still having trouble with calendars. All right, man. I think that's enough.
All right. We'll see you next time.
Sounds good. Bye. That's all for this week's episode of Cosmic Sponge. Please don't forget to rate and review us wherever you listen. It helps others find the show. If you have any questions or have a story you'd like to share, you can contact us using our email account at firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. If you'd like to support the show, consider becoming a Patreon at patreon.com/cosmicsponge, where you get access to exclusive content, including our Weird Wonders news and stories released every week. To explore everything Cosmic Sponge has to offer, including other ways to support the show, head on over to our website at www.cosmicsponge.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.